Good evening, everyone. It is nighttime on June 30th, 2025. I've had a very long day at work, but I thought I would try to address an interesting topic, which is who is to blame for America's enormous national debt from a political perspective. Before I go into that, I want to say thank you, everyone, for watching. I've appreciated all the comments and welcome to the new subscribers. And if you like my videos, I do hope you will hit the subscribe button, please. Okay, on to the topic at hand. Right now, we are about to see the big beautiful bill pass. It will add several trillion to the debt over the next several years. That is in addition to the several trillion that was already forecasted to be added to the debt. So this is just taking our already enormous deficits, making them bigger, and thus meaning that not only will our debt continue to grow, but the speed at which it grows will increase, and probably substantially. So, as is our tradition at this point, whenever we pass one of these reconciliation bills, whether it's a Democrat or Republican president or a Democrat or Republican controlled House or Senate, there is the usual finger pointing. It's your fault. No, it's your fault. You made this mess. No, you made this mess. So I thought, let's take a look at the numbers and let's figure out which political party is really responsible for these debts. Let me go back to Bill Clinton, because normally if you say it's the Democrats, the first thing they pull out is Bill Clinton. Hey, he balanced the budgets. Well, that's true. There were some balanced budgets toward the end of Clinton's time in office. But let's take a look. Oh, by the way, real quick, spoiler alert. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, by the time this video is over, you are not going to like me. So let's go back to Bill Clinton. During Bill Clinton's presidency, the United States national debt increased by about $1.6 trillion in 8 years. That's about $200 billion a year on average. That represented a 40% increase in the size of the national debt. So by the standards of the day, that was profligate spending. That was a huge increase in the debt. That is then followed up by George Bush. Now, if you're a Democrat, you were going to point to George Bush and say, hey, that guy was terrible for the debt. And you're right. During Bush's 8 years, the debt increased by $4.4 trillion, nearly 3 times what it did under Bill Clinton's time. And that represented an 80% increase in the national debt. OMG. But then comes Barack Obama. Now, he then adds 9.1 trillion to the debt, more than doubling what George Bush does. And that represents about a 90% increase in the national debt. So as we can see here, as both a total amount of debt and a percentage, each president is showing up, looking at the other one's fiscal irresponsibility and saying, hold my beer. Then comes President Trump, first term. In his first term, he adds 7.4 trillion to the national debt. That's in 4 years. Remember, the other 3 presidents were all 8 years. So we're just talking 4 years here. In that 4 years, 7.4 trillion, 38% increase in debt. Now, if you're wondering, wait, why did the percentage drop so much? The reason is because the national debt had become so enormous under the prior 3 presidents that even huge increases of several trillion dollars just don't represent the large percentage increase that they used to. Then comes Joe Biden. Joe Biden shows up in his 4 years and adds 9.3 trillion in his 4 years, realizing he was adding at roughly double the rate Barack Obama was and at a higher rate than even Donald Trump was. And at this point, they're making George Bush look like an amateur, and Bush made Bill Clinton look like, I don't know, an amateur himself. So the point is that Trump's Biden, it was 37% increase in the national debt. Now, again, remember what I was saying about the percentages and how the debt is just getting so big that even these huge increases aren't as big of a percentage. Biden added almost 2 trillion more debt in the same period of time that Trump did, and he was 1 percentage point lower, because that's how big the debt has gotten. So the point of this is, regardless of which president you look at, it goes from bad to worse to even worse to unbelievably bad to catastrophically bad, and now it's probably going to be even worse. Trump is probably on path to do something akin to what Biden did in his term, somewhere in the 9-10 trillion range during his 4 years, which is just staggering to think about it, that we're getting to where now it's like $9 or $10 trillion of new debt every 4 years is starting to become standardized. Now, here's the problem with the analysis I just gave you. While it is factually correct, it omits something. It is a single variable analysis. I only looked at the President of the United States. I did not look at who controlled the Senate, and I most importantly did not look at who controlled the House. all budgets originate in the House. Yes, the president has influence. Yes, the president has veto power. The president gets to negotiate for what he wants. But at the end of the day, the budget begins in the House. The House has to pass it first. Who the Speaker of the House is very important. So someone like Newt Gingrich, very fiscally hawkish. John Boehner, very fiscally hawkish. Nancy Pelosi never met a spending bill she didn't like. Mike Johnson, current Republican, has never met a spending bill he didn't like. So who is in charge of the House has a lot to do with this. And again, I'm also almost entirely ignoring Senate leadership. Are we doing Harry Reid? Are we doing Chuck Schumer? Are we doing Mitch McConnell? It's currently, I think, John Thune. So the analysis that I'm giving you is somewhat inaccurate because it treats as if the President of the United States is solely responsible for the debt and the deficit. And that is absolutely not true. But nonetheless, the presidents have to sign all these bills. The way that these debts happened was that the president never vetoed any of these. Now, oftentimes these bills, these debt increases, were compromises because the Republicans would hold the House but not the Senate, or the Democrats would hold the House but it'd be a tie in the Senate, or there's a Democrat president and a Republican Congress or something like that. So a lot of this is very bipartisan. And I'll point out that the biggest whopper bills passed under Trump, which were the COVID relief bills, had broad bipartisan support, and were almost unanimously supported by the Democrats. So both parties have their fingerprints all over this. Now, you can argue, I think the Democrats are a little bit more responsible, and here's why. Or you could argue, I think the Republicans are a little bit more responsible, and here's why. And there are some points you can make on either side of that issue, and you would be right to do so. But at the end of the day, I would submit to you the idea that at what point does it stop mattering? If two people are arguing over who's the worst criminal, one says, I've committed 49 felonies, and the other one says, well, I've only committed 43 felonies. And the guy with 49 felonies says, yeah, but some of the felonies you've done are worse than the ones I've done. And the guy who did the 43 says, well, yeah, I did do some of the worst ones, but you did them to nicer people than I did. I did them to worse people than you did. And back and forth, they're like, hold on. You guys both have committed over 40 felonies, and you're trying to argue over which one of you is not as bad of a criminal? Another example, think of kids arguing over who got the better failing grade on a test. One got a 52 and the other got a 50. It's, I outscored you by 2 points. You both failed. You both missed the 60 cutoff for a passing grade and missed it easily. So I know we're going to debate this issue ad nauseum, and I know that this is not going to go anywhere, but I want to point out that both parties have contributed massively and incredibly to the debt. And both parties, when they had the power to do something about it, have consistently chosen not only not to make it better, but indeed to make it much worse than it was before. So again, neither party is innocent. Both parties are just dripping with guilt on this one. Now look, I'm a Republican. I'm a lifelong Republican. I voted for Bush. I voted for Trump in 2016. I did not vote for him in the last election. So, hey, I got to take my lumps. Some of these people who are responsible for this, I cast ballots for them. So, yeah, I have my fingerprints on it too. But we need to understand the reason we have gotten away with this over these last 35-ish years is because of the fiscal restraint of the 200 years of American voters from 1788 until basically 1992. I know you go back and say, well, there was this debt, Civil War and World War II and during the Cold War and all this stuff. But yes, debt would go up, but it would also come back down. That has not happened since then. Basically, once the boomer generation took control, they have thrown a party. And now as part of the new reconciliation bill, or the big beautiful bill, there will be no tax on Social Security, so they're not even going to pay the bill. It is left for Gen X and Gen Z and millennials, and we're the ones who are going to have to pay all this. But yes, we will go through this exercise as we often do, and I just want to remind everyone we are all guilty. Both of our parties are guilty. Our tribes are guilty. Our favorite politicians are guilty. And no president and no party, when they've had the chance over the last 3 decades, has really done anything to make it better on a long-term basis. Short-term, yes, you could say the Republicans on a couple of points through Congress did some things to make it better. You could say Bill Clinton at a point did something to make it better, but the general trend line has only ever gotten worse the whole time. Those are the exceptions, not the rule. So hopefully we will do something better in the future, although I doubt it. I do believe national bankruptcy is utterly inevitable at this point, unless we go through a period of prolonged inflation and we just inflate our way out of it. And that is the topic for another video. All right, bye-bye.